In the eye of the storm. It was an early January morning in 1970. The entire railway station was still asleep under a blanket of a thick mist. A few tea vendors were ready to set up their stalls. Acharya Shri was arriving by Tufan Express at 6 a.m. I, along with my friend Atma Vijay Gupta, his daughters and a university student leader, had arrived at the station to receive him. We had invited Acharya Shri for satsang and public discourse in Patna for 4 days. Tufan, which means cyclone in Urdu, was an apt name for the train that brought him to Patna. Wrapped only in a white lungi and shawl, he walked out gracefully. A few beads of water rolled down his freshly washed hair onto his body. Arun, but I thought you had your examinations. How come you are here? He asked. I was surprised he knew about it, because I didn't remember writing it in the letters. I only remembered later that I had casually mentioned to him 5 months ago when I had met him in Dwaraka that I had my exams in January. His memory was razor sharp. How could I remain at the hostel when you are here? I said. He smiled. I went on board to fetch his luggage. He was here just for 4 days, but he had 3 suitcases and 2 bags. He scanned the luggage and said, But where is my bulwarker? Did you not find it with the rest of the luggage? I had seen a bulwarker, but I couldn't put the image of him and a bulwarker together. I had thought it probably belonged to some other passenger in the train and left it there intentionally. But as I would learn later, he was very particular about his health and he exercised regularly in those days. His body had the grace and beauty of a yogi. 2 of his suitcases contained a pillow each. There are over 100,000 books in his personal library at Pune Ashram, and they contain his underlines and notes. People often asked him why he consumed the books voraciously despite being enlightened. Weren't all his questions answered? His reply had touched me much. He said, My hunger for knowledge had been utterly sated, but if I am to help the people, I need to speak to them in the language they understand, to trace the history of their thought process and the surroundings that shape their thoughts. Therefore, if I am to help them, I have to be one among them. It is a torture for me to read all this nonsense. Once you know yourself, there is nothing worth knowing. But I want to reach out to as many people as possible, and I must be more informed than they are if I have to convince them to listen to me. Osho is undoubtedly one of the most well-read people in human history. His discourses reflect the depth and breadth of his understanding. And he is not just widely read, he has also left a rare legacy of over 700 books which are related to the total transformation of human consciousness. The clear influence of Osho can be seen in the discourses of all the spiritual leaders of today. Most of them read Osho's work regularly, and their talks are full of anecdotes and examples from Osho literature. After we put the entire luggage in the car, there was only enough space left for Acharya Shri, Dr. Ramchandra and his daughter. I am ready. I must discuss the program. Just follow us in the rickshaw. Acharya Shri astonished us with his figure. In those days he was in his largest phase. Being with him was like being in the eye of the storm. It was difficult to keep up with his pace. It was as though he could stretch time at will. A day would seem like a lifetime. Later he spoke about his phase in his Bhagavad Gita discourse series. When this second phase, that of Rajas, began, I kept on traveling throughout the country. As much as I traveled in those 10 to 15 years, no one would travel even in 2 or 3 lives. As much as I spoke during those 10 to 15 years would ordinarily require 10 to 15 lives. From morning until night I was on the move, traveling everywhere. With or without any reason, I was creating controversies and making criticism, because the more controversies, the quicker the transition through the second phase of activity. I therefore began to criticize Gandhiji. I began to criticize socialism. Neither did I have any relationship with these subjects, nor was there any attachment to politics. I had no interest whatsoever in these. But when the entire population of the country was observed in these tensions, and I had to pass by this same population, there seemed, even if just for fun, a necessity to create controversies. Therefore, during this transition of my second phase of activity, I engineered a number of controversies and enjoyed them. For the first 32 years of his life, Osho lived his tamasic phase in totality. During that time, he lived as inactively as Lao Tzu or Raman Maharishi. His parents were mystified as to how he could even sustain himself with such an inactive life devoid of ambition. But this energy transmuted into Rajas in the beginning of 1960. During this phase, the brilliance of his enlightenment expressed itself in an astounding explosion of activity. Those 4 days with him in Patna were the expression of the semi-explosive energy. We reached Dr. Prasad's house, where Acharya Shri was to stay for the next 4 days. Acharya Shri preferred his room to be as empty as possible, so except for a bed, he had emptied the room, and I and laid a carpet on the floor. Acharya Shri turned to me and asked, Arun, did you make proper advertisement of the program? I told him we had printed several pamphlets. I want to knock at every door. I don't want anyone to tell me that they hadn't heard about the program. So Arun, you just take a loudspeaker and go around the town and make announcement. I couldn't believe he just said that. When Acharya Shri arrived that morning and we showed him the schedule, we had thought the ordeal was over. If only we knew the ordeal had just begun. Rather reluctantly, Tufan and I hired a rickshaw, took a loudspeaker, and went through the dusty street of Patna announcing, Attention, attention, attention. This evening Acharya Shri Rajneesh, celebrated author of the book From Sex to Subconsciousness, is giving a lecture at Singha Library. Not many people had heard of Acharya Shri then, so we added, Acharya Shri's revolutionary analysis of religion is bound to stun you. Come together with your family for the discourse. Join the discourse every day from 7 to 9 in the morning and 6 to 8 in the evening. Tufan was a student leader and had a natural flair for these sorts of things. I sat half-heartedly in the rickshaw as the dust and the stench made me feverish. When I reached Dr. Prasad's house, Acharya Shri saw me arrive, and just as I was at the threshold, he asked me, Where is Mathura Prasad Mishra? Get him here. Mathura Prasad was the member of the parliament, and in those days he was far more famous than Acharya Shri in Bihar. I knew that Mathura Prasad used to reside in Rajendra Nagar too. I rushed to fetch him. When I reached his residence, he was having an informal sort of meeting with his party cadres. He was a very popular Congress leader at the time. I told him I had come on behalf of Acharya Shri to extend his invitation to see him. Mathura Prasad responded with great enthusiasm. He was a connoisseur of tea. Nothing pleased him more than a cup of well-brewed tea. Since he was very particular about his tea, he often used to prepare it himself. Mathura Prasad was a man of unusual devotion and integrity. After taking sannyas, he became Swami Ananda Maitreya and became an intrinsic part of Osho's work. Later, he had been given a small storeroom in Lao Tzu House in Pune. In those days, Pune Ashram had only two buildings, Lao Tzu House and Krishna House. Lao Tzu House used to be a residence of a former Maharaja. It had 4 large bedrooms, a well-maintained lawn, and spacious verandas. Apart from Acharya Shri, the others staying at Lao Tzu House were Vivek, Lakshmi, Mukta, and her 2 daughters. Although Ananda Maitreya had served as a member of parliament for 20 years, he was one of the quietest and most humble residents at Pune Ashram. In the early days, Maitreya Swami's association with Acharya Shri created a scandal. Later, it even sparked a new rumor in Patna. Maitreya Swami, Rajendra Prasad, Tufan, and I came from the same Bhumihar Brahmin ancestry, the so-called upper-class Brahmin clan. Patna was ripe with racial politics. I triumphantly ushered Mathura Prasad to Acharya Shuri's room. I was hopeful that after this I would get to spend some time with him. But as I entered the room, he asked me to go around and find a place and audience for the afternoon talk. I told him flatly that it wasn't possible to organize talk program at such short notice. He was in no mood to listen to me. His visit had coincided with Saraswati Puja, the spring festival celebrated throughout India and Nepal to appease Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and art. On that day, the larger-than-life earthen statues of goddess are worshipped in every nook and cranny of the country. We found one such a congregation with a ready-made stage and a sound system. At such a short notice, there was no way we could hope to design a stage of our own. So we pleaded with the organizer to give us the stage for a religious discourse for 1 hour. These were simple folks. They wanted to know who the orator was. I showed them Acharya Shuri's picture. The organizer looked at the picture closely and asked again, "A Hindu saint?" "Yes." They obviously saw no harm in letting him do his talk for a little while. None of them knew anything about him. Acharya Shuri climbed gracefully up onto the dais. The audience consisted of very ordinary people, who I could see weren't prepared for Acharya Shuri at all. Perhaps the only people who could understand a little bit of what he was saying were we, the organizers. Acharya Shuri sat down on the elevated wooden podium. He was clearly dismayed by the quality of the stage and audience. He could see that he was disappointed with the arrangement. We could see. But the show had to go on. Such is the humor of time. Acharya Shuri began his discourse in Hindi, pointing towards the huge clay statue of the goddess Saraswati beneath which he was placed. I have always been a staunch opponent of idol worshipping, and here I am, seated underneath a larger-than-life statue of the goddess, who seems to have long left this country. The opening lines of his discourse shocked the audience, most of whom had gathered to hear the glorification of the goddess. We worship Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, in each corner of the country, and yet she chooses to reside in Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. Indians have even started going to the West to do their higher studies on Indian culture, Hinduism, and Oriental mysticism. We worship Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, with such zeal, but it seems she has left this country for the cleaner and quieter atmosphere of the West, which has embraced science and technology to enhance the quality of life. Instead of creating wealth, eradicating poverty, and addressing the question of development, we are content to install the statue of gods and goddesses by beating drums, screaming bhajans, dancing fanatically on the street, and burning firecrackers just to add more pollution to the already polluted cities of India. The puja organizers had started throwing alarming glances at us. The tension was visible. The audience was at a loss, but I was absolutely reveling in the discourse and wanted to go on. Yet I knew it was about time we had to get Acharya Shri safely out of the place. It was almost always the case. Acharya Shri hit where it hurt the most. Audiences were always left bewildered and enraged by his discourse. The greatest challenge for us as organizer in those days was to get him safely back to the car. "Why is your goddess angry with you all?" he was asking, even amidst their anger and confusion. The audience were curious to find out why. "Why is your goddess angry with you all?" Silence fell on the place. "It is because you have neglected science and technology and resorted to trying to appease the lifeless statue of gods and goddesses instead." He couldn't be any truer, because during that time we didn't even have a recorder to record this discourse. A foreign student in my hostel had a tape recorder. I had asked him to record Acharya Shri's discourse, but he had let me down at the last minute. This important discourse by Acharya Shri during his 5-day visit to Patna couldn't be recorded. In this city where the goddess of affluence was worshipped, we couldn't even find a tape recorder. The evening event, however, went better than expected. The lawn of the Shina library was packed with people of high intellect. They were all mesmerized by his beautiful oration and his unique analysis. He began his discourse by saying, "Firstly, neither do I have an association nor an organization. I speak as an individual. I speak only that which I feel is right. It is not necessary for you to agree with me. You will probably think most of what I say is wrong because I talk against the conditioning that humanity has gathered. All philosophers, reformers, and politicians want to provide humanity with a certain way of life, a set of morals and a religion. I only see slavery and bondage in it. I don't want to give you a way of life. Rather, I want humanity to be free of all conditionings. Humanity has created a law in order to enslave itself. Law means that you live according to the rules of society. Character means something else. I mean that it is not the society that decides, but the individual. If we analyze in detail, then we will find that the majority of our moral conduct is sex-centered. If we analyze in detail, then we will find that the majority of our moral conduct is sex-centered. When we say that a man is characterless, we immediately think that he is having multiple sexual relations. We will not think that he cheats, skips taxes, lies, or is corrupt. For us, all these things carry no value. For us, sex is the primary thing to decide one's character. A society that bases its morality on sex is perverted. It makes those who are forced to live with one partner feel that all other human beings are immoral. Those who are forced to live with one partner feel that all other human beings are immoral. Actually, sex is a beautiful private affair between two people. Morality should be concerned with lying, tax evasion, hypocrisy, not fulfilling one's social duties, and violence and cruelty. As sex is an intrinsic biological need, to fulfill this need, people will bypass all social norms and morality. This is why many socially recognized people have two faces. This is how the big web of hypocrisy begins. If you want to break this hypocrisy, then we should base our morality not on idealistic but realistic grounds. The famed Indian poetess and member of parliament Amrita Pritam said, "While our religions makes people fearful, Rajneesh's whole philosophy is to make humanity free from fear." Acharya Shri's words were novel and fiery, and it was impossible to remain indifferent after listening to them. Once the session was over, the crowd responded in frenzy and wanted to hug him, touch his feet, and basically mob him from all sides. We were still high from meditation, but it was time again to get him safely to the car. The making of history. Without really being aware, I was the middle of the making of history. Acharya Shri's presence was enough to unleash the fountains of love in the hearts turned barren by years of mechanical living. On the third day, we had scheduled for his talk program to be in my college at Patna University. Even though I had arranged for that talk with great enthusiasm, I sank deeper into despair. As the day approached, we had two factions among the students in our university, the Socialist Students Federation and the Hindu Nationalist Student Council. And both groups were against Acharya Shri. The socialists were angry with him because of his book Beware of Socialism, and thought him as an advocate of capitalism, funded by Americans. His recent tussle with the Shankaracharya of Puri in the World Religion Conference and his unorthodox views on religion made him equally unpopular among Hindus who thought that he was influenced by communism and called him an agent of the Russia. I have seen the intellect of many intellectuals falter during Osho's life. His large commune in America, where labor itself was the wealth, and where money was not used at all was similar to the commune envisioned by Karl Marx. Thus, in America, he was regarded as an agent of the KGB, while socialists thought him a spokesperson for capitalism. Those who did not want to think even that much said that he advocated promiscuity and labeled him sex guru. But Osho's teaching was so radical and futuristic that it will make humanity a good many years before it can truly understand his message. Osho said Karl Marx is basically a jealous Jew rationalizing his jealousy into beautiful jargon. The remedy that he proposes is fallacious. Firstly, if you distribute the wealth of those who are rich to the poor, what will be the result? The poor will not become rich. The rich will only become poor. You will be distributing poverty. Yes, people will not feel jealous anymore because they will all be equally poor. I am against poverty. Hence, I am against communism. I want people to be equally rich. But for that, a totally different approach is needed. It is not a question of distribution of wealth, because there is not much wealth to distribute. How many people are there who are rich? 2% in India. Now, the wealth of 2% distributed to 98% poor people is just like a spoonful of sugar thrown into the ocean. You are simply losing one spoonful of sugar unnecessarily. At least it could have given one man 1 cup of tea, even that is gone. Not that others are gaining anything, but they will all enjoy the idea. Now nobody is drinking tea. We are all equal. Otherwise, this man was drinking tea and everybody was jealous. The people who have created wealth have a certain talent for creating it. You should use their talent. You should make it an art to be taught to everybody. They are not to be punished because they have created wealth. I am against communism because it is only a negative philosophy. I am all for communism. That should be the right word, communism. A commune is respectful of every individual uniqueness, respectful of every individual's talent, and tries to help his talent grow, help him grow towards his potential. I want communes all over the world so that slowly nations can disappear. And there are only communes, living small units of humanity totally, joyously helping everybody to be himself. Marx proposes the dictatorship of the proletariat, the dictatorship of the poor. That is stupid. They are poor, and if they are in power, they will make everybody poor. I propose the dictatorship of the enlightened ones. Nobody had proposed it up to now. And sometimes, out of my crazy mind, this idea I have carried my whole life. Dictatorship of the enlightened ones. Because if it is of enlightened ones, it cannot be dictatorship. It is a contradiction in terms. So, it was only natural that he was misunderstood by my fellow students at the university. As it happened, I had asked the university to provide me with a wooden platform and a few tables, but at the last moment they turned down the request. We had placed a small pot of fresh flowers nearby and lit some incense. Before I could gather myself, I saw I was facing a mass of thousands who were looking at me with a mixture of mockery and curiosity. I started speaking, at first in subdued voice, but very soon I heard myself speaking with such authority I surprised myself, if not others. Dear friends, it is our great fortune that Acharya Shri is among us. It is also a matter of great pride for our college. This is an historic day. We had heard about Krishna, Kabir, Nanak, and other enlightened beings. But such is our fortune that we are seated with a person who has walked right out of history. Someone screamed from the crowd, "What is this history you are talking about? Where is the name inscribed? Who is he anyway?" I can only tell you this much. He is a dangerous man. I had found a new calm and strength. I too had gone to him to find out about him, who he is and what was his teaching. But when I returned, I had returned with a different set of questions. Who am I? Why am I in this world? What is the purpose of my being? Acharya Shri is not here to sing a lullaby to you, to help us sinking deeper into our slumber. He is here to shake us out of our dreams, no matter how dear they be to us. He comes from the pages of the history where Buddha, Christ, Kabir, and Nanak live. It comes from the pages of the history from where the unknown beckons. He is the destroyer of dreams, a swapna banjak. The campus was the same, the students were the same, and the professor were the same. And yet how different it all was. The air had a different fragrance, as if Acharya Shri had infused some magic into it. I walked back to the audience, but I was levitating in thin air, almost floating. History was in the making. How fortunate were those who witnessed it unfold.